You're now watching B2B Vault, the Biz-to-Biz podcast, hosted by Alan Kopelman, powered by Nationwide Payment Systems, the #1 solution for payment processing.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of B2B Vault, the Biz-to-Biz podcast. We talk about payments, fintech, business, entrepreneurship, and all things business. And we want business owners to check out today's episode. We're going to be talking about chargebacks, VAMP, how to prevent chargebacks, how to deal with them in the e-commerce world. And today's guest is Scott Adams from Fraud Deflect. So Scott, welcome to the show, and introduce yourself to the audience.
All right. Thanks for having me, Alan. Hey guys, I'm Scott Adams, with the CEO, co-founder of Fraud Deflect. So I've been, a merchant and entrepreneur for 25 something years now. Started out as an engineer. Just got lucky, right? The internet, met the right people in the right place, right time, and ended up running a company, taking it over from a husband and wife who started it just like many of you guys, in their house, in their garage, and didn't, in this case though, they lucked upon the internet, had no idea what to do once their business took off. So brought me in, I fixed a bunch of IT things, and that's also when I discovered chargebacks. But after that, we grew that business, exited, got to around 25 million a year, up from around 4 million a year when I started. Then I became a merchant, got hired by a company, if you happen to play video games, called Riot Games. They make League of Legends. Was there for about 5 years, took them from tons and tons of chargebacks to very few. And then when they got bought, similar thing, ended up actually at Epic Games. If you didn't know Riot, you know Epic. If you don't know that name, you do know Fortnite. If you have kids, you've seen a kid, Fortnite. Same problems though, right? They have a bunch of chargebacks, and something I learned early on and has been reinforced every company I've helped. You can be a $1 million a year company or $1 billion a year company. It's the same problems, different number of zeros, but the same problems. And so it's with them. And then through that, though, ended up meeting a lot of people along with that in conferences at Visa. Found out about a program called VMPI, which is a predecessor to a lot of the things that we use today. And they asked me to be one of the first to use it. So we grew that within about a year and a half, sold a business built around that to Count and Equifax. And then on, to the future, I left there after Equifax had acquired us, consulted for a while, and came back to the same conclusion that chargebacks are a pain in the butt for merchants and they need help. And so that's kind of why we started Fraud Deflect.
Yeah, merchants, no matter what size you are, whether you're starting in business, whether you're in business, growing your business, blowing up, your company, you have to have a plan from the beginning, how to deal with chargebacks. And, a lot of times, and today, we're dealing with like a couple of different issues because we have merchants that sell physical goods, right? So there's a set of rules for them, but then we have this growing area that's like on fire ever since COVID of, the digital part of e-commerce, SaaS companies, digital products, AI products, where it's just digital. There's not a physical, we're not taking this and shipping it to somebody, to somebody's house, so that's a whole nother ball game, in the world of, merchants on how they deal, how do you deal with physical products and how you deal with digital products. And one of the things, I always tell my merchants is, you've got to have some kind of programming in your system. So when somebody orders something, you guys are looking at the address. You're not shipping to mailbox stores, freight forwarders, ghost addresses, mailboxes. And because that can just result in a chargeback because you're not shipping to an actual address. And that's a huge problem in that world, and then
In those
just
cases,
the amount of Huh?
And saying in those cases, so you're probably not shipping to a real person either.
Right. Yeah, but they don't know that, or you
True.
get an order in like we had a cigar merchant one time. They called me and go, "Do you think this order is real for 10 humidors?"
Hmm.
You need to call that person on the phone, 10 humidors, like
Go
who's,
visit them.
are they gonna,
That's a lot.
is it a real business? And that's happened to them 3 or 4 times. Once it was actually like a company and they actually wanted to buy 10 humidors and they wanted a custom uh their logo on the box and it was a real customer. The other ones were all fake,
Yeah, we
and
always
they were literally about to get scammed.
yeah, we had one back when I was at Riot Games. One of the funny ones was that it's very similar to that. Like I always told the team, if it's too good to be true, it's always been the case, right? It might not be true. But being that we work in fraud, we see a lot of things. And so, like, you never know. So you got to research. And so one day I walked into the office and just walking through the hall, and one of my fraud analysts grabs me and he says, "Hey, I just got this order. I'm going to ban this guy. He's trying to buy, thousands and thousands of dollars of riot points, which were the in-game currency." And said, "Okay, probably a scam, or probably fraud, but let's check it out." And so I went back to his desk and we're looking, and it's from Abu Dhabi. And we looked at the account, and the guy bought a lot of stuff. He basically had everything that we offered, and that was tons of money, like thousands and thousands of dollars, and of all in-game things, right? So virtual items. And so I said to the guy, I said, "Hey, email this guy, see if you can get like a video call." And within like 5 minutes, the guy emails right back and sends him a Zoom link. And then we said, "Hey, actually use ours." So we sent them a link. We have a video call and talked to the guy, and he's just it felt like you could trust him. He was definitely in a place. This was before AI was so good, so
Right.
probably definitely in Abu Dhabi in a palace of some kind. And the guy said, "Look, hey, I know there's a lot. I'm not surprised that your fraud filters caught it, but it's real. Like I'm a prince of something, and I want my whole entourage." I don't remember his words, but basically he had 10 people that he basically said, "Hey, you're going to play League of Legends with me." And he knew there was a big sale coming up. And so he was stocking up on Riot
Right.
Points so he could gift his team or his entourage or whatever they were, his friends, all these skins so they could play together during the holidays. And it was like right before Christmas. And so, yeah, so we let it through. It was a nicely in this case, as you were mentioning, right? It's a virtual good. So the risk is really low, right? Worst case, we give his money back,
Right.
or we give the cardholder their money back. It's his fraud. And what are we out, right? We have very little incremental costs there. But yeah, this was probably, we actually ended up giving a great experience to a very loyal fan and a gamer, and never got charged back. And sure, a lot of those could be a scam, especially nowadays with AI. But sometimes it's good, you don't, especially with virtual goods. I always say, unless you're in big trouble with chargebacks or something, err on the side of helping your player, err on the side of helping your consumer, give them a good experience.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when I talk to digital merchants, they're like, "Oh, but these people want their money back or they claim that it's fraud." And I'm like, it's not like you guys shipped a watch to somebody or $1,000 item. This is just air, and you gotta like not take it so personally.
Yep. Yeah.
Like you
There's
can't
definitely,
take
there's
it.
costs in making that stuff, but it's sunk cost. Right.
Right.
And so, digital is definitely very different from physical in that way, for sure.
So like when it comes to like friendly fraud, what kind of advice would you give a merchant selling not digital good, physical goods? What kind of advice would you give merchants selling physical goods so that they can watch out for fraud and try to prevent fraud at their business?
Yeah. It's really, in a way, it's mostly not that different from digital. Like, so, I approach it, depends on where you're going, right? So we generally say, because, the ecosystem nowadays has so many tools out there, so many models, they're all running, right? So the card brands have models running, the issuers have models running, the acquirers are running models. They're all trying to stop, call it real fraud, right? So the criminal side. But it's really hard to catch friendly fraud. So I always say kind of two things. I say one, pre-auth and maybe a little bit early post-auth. So just, I don't know. I know you're saying we're talking to business owners here. So just in case, pre-auth, let's say before they press the order button or right after they press it, but before the transaction goes to the card brands, goes to the acquirer or hit your gateway. That's the pre-auth side. So in there, think about business rules. What makes sense, right? So like you told the story about a guy with ordering 10 humidors, right? Does your business normally get orders for 10 of your product? And if it doesn't, should you allow that to go through? At least not without review, right? You can manual review, especially on a physical good. So think about business rules. Don't bet on, oh yeah, 1 in 1,000 orders fits this criteria. So maybe that 10 humidors, but think about the things. What do 99% of the orders fit? So should they ever order 3 of your thing? Should they order 1? What's that? How about the cadence? Maybe it's something that gets used. Consumable would be the word that I was looking for there. So if it's consumable, what makes sense, right? Maybe it's a family and they're all using it. But again, do they need 10 boxes of the thing? So think about these kind of things. Dollar amounts. Does it make sense? It's like, this might sound a little bit old school, but I find that the old school stuff works.
Exactly.
Just don't be too tight with it, right? So be too tight, but don't be too loose. So think about it, just really rack your brain. If you've got a data analyst, look at your data. What fits the 99%? And do that pre-auth. And if it's too slow, remember you can always void. So that's where I say then secondly, think about post-auth. So you've already taken the transaction, you've approved it, but ideally it's not settled yet, right? I don't know your setup, but probably you've got 12 hours. So in the next few hours or 12 hours or something, or check with your PSP on when they settle versus capture, and you can void. So maybe something takes longer. Maybe the API calls are slow. Maybe you want a manual review. So physical good, more manual review. Physical goods.
I always tell merchants, like, be careful with like pre-authing cards, right? And then not settling those pre-auths, because then when the card holder comes back and it's not the same transaction, you're going to trigger a lot of declines.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And that's, to be clear, that's not what I'm saying.
right.
I'm saying auth it and probably let it go through. If it doesn't, but then if for some reason the first 12 hours you decide, you know what, this probably is fraud, you can void it and you never take
Right.
their money. Now, I do have
Exactly.
merchants that tell me, hey, we want to do this funny way where we off something, we wait 2 weeks. Well, that's not going to work, right? That's going to get declines, that's going to get chargebacks, all sorts of problems. You might
Right.
re-auth at that point, but then it looks like a second charge to the consumer. So I never
Yes.
think those are good ideas. But flip side, in the physical good world, right? Generally, you don't actually take the money until you ship the product, especially if it's going to take a while, because that gets into things called future delivery, which also causes chargebacks. So you just got to be careful. If you're gonna auth and then ship or and then capture, you got to do it within a few days. You can't wait
Yeah.
weeks.
So we have a client that's like had an issue. So we went into their setup. And so any card that was over a certain amount of money, we had to go into the queue. So the gate it hit the gateway costing you whatever, 5-10 cents, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it
Yep.
didn't, and you got an auth, which that was another 10 cents, right? But you didn't pass the transaction to go through to settlement. So these large transactions, which they get like maybe 3 or 4 in a week, right? And then they're able to email the customer, call the customer, verify the transaction. If it's verified before the batch settles, they can let it go. They just click the button, let it go through. If it's not, they click the button and void it out. And I was explaining to them one time, don't let them go through and then issue a refund, because sometimes you're issuing a refund that the actual real card holder is doing a chargeback. And then you got to
Yep.
make sure that you're sending in the sale receipt, the void receipt, and you cost yourself money. Let's just say whatever, round
Money
numbers,
and time.
3%,
Yeah.
3% on a $500 or $1,000 sale. You paid that juice. You're not getting that back, right?
Yep.
It,
Yep.
you're not getting that money back. So now, and then you took the time of your staff when they could have just hit a button and eliminated all of that. And then they're fighting the chargeback to go, oh, well, the person's card went through for $1,000 and here's the refund. So there shouldn't be a chargeback, blah, 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 blah. And then your money's gone. And now you got to wait and get your money back. And, so
Yeah,
you
it's
got
a
to really
mess.
manage this stuff well.
Yeah,
What,
reviews got to
yeah,
be fast. If you're going to do anything like that, you got to do it, like I say, before it settles. Technically,
right,
you can do what your customer's saying, obviously, but it creates problems. And that's what, like, in a way to continue on that vein. And the other thing I suggest is, like, one of the things that we do a lot of Fraud Deflect is we work with the card brands and issuers so that we can share information during that customer support call. So, for example, what you just talked about, that's a really common use case where it doesn't have quite as much now, but it still does happen where the issuer doesn't know you did a refund, right? You'd
right,
think it feels like it's all instant because you're pressing buttons and you see it in your dashboard or whatever, but it could still take 4 days for the issuer to get it. It could take weeks if it's international. And so because of that delay, yeah, they'll let the consumer do a chargeback. And sometimes this becomes a scam where the consumer will do a chargeback or do a refund and then immediately call the issuer and do a chargeback. There's no way they know about that yet, right? It's got to go through multiple batches. It's got to, as much as it should be instant, it's got to go around the globe and it's going to take a while. So what we can do is,
people think like because we're in this like instant society, right?
yeah, it's so easy to think
Oh, I
that way.
did it. Well, why didn't they see it? And sometimes they don't see it. Or let's say it's even a debit card. And then some banks don't even look at these debit cards except once a week,
Yeah, it takes time. And so that's why
Right.
what we can do though is, like, let's say the consumer calls in to the issuer after they've done the refund. We know right away for most of our partners that a refund happened. And so we can actually tell the issuer in real time, hey, a refund happened on this. Here's the ARN, here's all their information. And then they will not do a chargeback. They'll push back and they'll say, hey, consumer, look, I see that the merchant says they refunded this today. Sorry, but you got to wait a couple of days and it'll show up on your statement. And then on top of that, we can send other information. We can send anti-fraud info. We can send shopping cart info. So think about, you mentioned friendly fraud. Think about some of the common reasons for friendly fraud. Like, it's for any industry, but I mentioned video games. It's an easy one to talk about. I can tell you actually, when I was at Epic, when I started there with Fortnite, their descriptor, if you guys know what that is, right? The words that are on the credit card statement for the transaction, it said Epic Games. Now today, everyone might know it because of things in the media, but
Right.
back then, nobody knew who Epic was, unless you were a hardcore gamer on a PS2 or something. But if you're just a mom or a dad and your kid was playing some video game, you didn't know who Epic was. You knew Fortnite because the kid wouldn't stop talking about it. But you didn't know Epic. And so because of that, again, that happens a lot, right? If you're a mom and pop, you're a new business, and you don't have someone like Alan on your side telling you, you don't want mom and dad inc.com on your website or on your descriptor, you want to put your product name or something the consumer would recognize.
Yeah,
Right.
we even have like clients and they might have like 5 or 6 digital products. And then we'll go, okay, well, you need to use this gateway versus this gateway. So you can go and set up 5 dynamic
Yes.
descriptors. So when somebody purchases game A, it says game A,
Yep.
game B, game C. And you're going to end up, and we did that for one client, and actually we reduced chargebacks by like
Substantially, I
95%.
bet.
They were
Yep.
like shocked. They're like, what? That was it? They just
Yeah, well,
couldn't-
that's a lot of, if you think about friendly fraud, right? Some of it, and I always say, probably if you've ever watched anything I've done before, I say this kind of thing a lot because it just happens all the time. Is that problem? People don't always know, right? There's friendly fraud and there's friendly fraud, right? There's friendly fraud that it's actually friends, it's actually customers. And in this case, right, they didn't know the descriptor.
Right.
They're confused. Maybe the spouse bought it. Maybe the kid. It doesn't mean it's fraud. It just means they don't recognize.
We
And
just
so
also tell people put the phone number in your descriptor so that people can see the phone number. I hate it. Like I got a charge on my credit card recently. And I was like, what is this company? So I Googled the name and I was like, oh, okay. Now I know who that is.
Yeah.
Right. But there was
you're
no
educated
phone number
on this
there.
stuff. Yeah.
And I had another one that came through with a weird name. And there was a phone number, and I called it up, and I was like, I never did business with you, blah, 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 blah. And then it turned out, when I was talking to them on the phone, they're like, oh, well, that's our corporate name, and you bought this. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's weird. I actually tried to sell
Yeah.
them merchant services because
They
you
need
guys must be
dynamic
having
descriptors.
I said, you guys must be having a lot of problems because it's also one company with some multiple different websites, and they're not letting people, they're just checking out to the corporate name, and it's very confusing. So another thing,
Yep.
merchants don't understand about, I want to talk about two things. So, because we don't want to be like an hour talking, but
Yeah. We can do this for hours, I'm
Vamp
sure.
Vamp is a huge discussion.
Ooh,
But the other thing is when I was doing the demo and learning about your company, you guys have like this one step in front of where fraud happens, right? So let's talk about that, and then let's talk a little bit about Vamp. I don't think people really
sure.
understand Vamp, but I was
Yeah.
explaining to somebody yesterday, I go, if the bank goes over their Vamp, like your acquiring bank where your merchant account is at, then that flows down to the ISO, not just that ISO, all their ISOs, and then
Yep.
that flows down to all their merchants. I don't think it's truly fair for the way that's happening right now. But like they say, poop rolls downhill. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
that's a kind of a huge problem with Vamp. But let's talk about the what makes Fraud Deflect special. Because there's tons of chargeback companies out there, right?
Oh yeah.
But I saw this one thing in the demo that was really the differentiator of your
For sure.
company.
Yeah. So I'll give you two things. So one, like before we started recording, I was telling you, my background and how, a big thing about all this is just being passionate about helping, right? We truly started this company to be transparent, to be trustworthy, to help our merchants. And I was myself and a lot of our team, we were all merchants. And so we were merchants long enough that at heart, that's who we are. So I can't not think like a merchant. And that's true of most of my CX staff, a lot of our other team, right? So that's one that sets us apart. You hear that, but are they really that passionate? Have they been doing this for 25 years? Believe it or not, makes a huge difference. Now, technology wise, so we did not set out to sell alerts. We didn't set out to do representments. Now we do those things. But I almost look at those as kind of insurance and stopgap situations. Now they're good products, but where we focused is, one on the ability, to gather information at the point of checkout. And so we have a product we call FDID that is a behavioral device fingerprinting technology that lets us gather information, nothing that's secret or PII, but things that we can use to model to show this is probably not fraud, or it is. Now, secondly, what we do is that there's products out there that allow you to communicate with the issuer in real time before they press dispute. And so we focused mostly on that and optimize around that. And we call this a deflection. And so what we can do is that, let's say, we mentioned it earlier, sort of, when the consumer or the cardholder calls their bank. So, they think they might be calling Visa, but it's Citibank, it's Capital One, it's one of these issuers. They call into that system. They pull up that order. What shows up on the screen? Unless you're using our service, it's nothing. It's literally that corporate name. There's no description of what you bought. There's no description of you, of anything. But what we can do, literally, we have access to hundreds of fields of information that we can pass forward to the issuer during that phone call. And so what we do is we'll take, the consumer name, the email address, the website they bought from. We'll take things like the whole shopping cart. So, let's say that you went to, whatever store online, you bought 5 things. We'll pass that information up. Now, what this allows us to do is now the rep at the bank can play customer service for you. They can say, hey, Alan, it looks like, I know you don't recognize this, but do you know this person? Mrs. Kuppelman. And he said, well, of course I do. Oh, well, so does she ever shop at the store? And did she maybe recently buy these 5 things? Oh, shoot, yeah. I asked her to buy those. So Sorry, thanks for your help. Hangs up. There's no chargeback. There's no fraud. There's nothing that flows down to the acquirer level or to Visa or MasterCard. And so because of that, your chargeback rate goes down, your fraud rate goes down, and thus, we're going to talk in a second, your vamp rate goes down. And we optimize around doing this part of the system. And then on top of that, we have the alerts and those kind of products that if the deflections don't work, we can still stop the chargeback before it becomes a chargeback. And that way it doesn't impact your chargeback rates. But in the beauty of the deflection, though, is there's also no refund, right? You just saved your sale. You have a happy customer. Now, also, let's say that you did do a refund, or that the refund already happened, and you don't see it in your statement, or something like this. Like if you're a merchant, let's say the consumer did that refund already, but like the example earlier, the issuer doesn't know yet. So if the consumer does try to call in and get a refund, either to scam you or legitimately, it's been 2 days, where's my money? Right? They don't understand. So they call the issuer, we pass up, hey, this was already refunded 2 days ago. Here's the tracking information. So most likely, again, the issuer says, no, you can't do a chargeback because we know a refund's coming. And so there again, no chargeback, no fraud. This case, it was a refund, but it would have also been a chargeback and been a big mess.
And that
So
happens,
that's kind of where we focus.
That happens more often than people think,
It really does.
It happens a lot. One thing I think merchants don't understand about chargebacks, and I explained this to a merchant recently, and they were like, no, that can't be. But see, you're an expert, so it's not coming from me. So I tried to explain to them. I go, your customer is doing a chargeback. They contact their bank. They say, I'm charging back $500. I didn't get whatever it was. And then you send in your evidence to us, which goes to Merlink or whoever is doing the chargebacks. It goes over to them. Then that information goes back to the consumer's bank. And they're the one who ultimately is the judge and the jury on the chargeback. Yep. And I said, because I told the customer, I said, up to me, I look at it, I go, you win. You got a transaction, you delivered the goods, there's the tracking number, boom, boom, boom. You win, but I'm not the judge or the jury. The ISO is not the judge or the jury. The acquirer doesn't do that. It's ultimately the cardholder's bank. It's not even, there's no third party. The only third party is the person passing the information around.
Yeah, unfortunately, not a very fair situation, but it is what it is, right? So, and that's where we think of this deflection process is pretty good because it lets us share that information and show the issuer, right? Because the issuer doesn't want chargebacks either. It costs them money. I used to say it was like $50, but someone told me recently at an issuer that it costs them $150 for every chargeback, even if it's a $10 item, just because of the man hours. And they don't want it. So what I kind of jokingly say, but it's true. It's like I'm sending the information forward as if I were representing. That's what goes forward in real time before the chargeback happens. And so based on that, it's like I'm almost saying like, issuer, I dare you charge me that. I'm showing you my hand. Why would you do this? And thus it works, right? If it is a good transaction, if it's not fraud, we'll deflect it. Many times if it's fraud, we'll deflect it because we're just showing we have enough information to, beyond a reasonable doubt. So we end up winning that way. And we have a really good success with that and drives down those rates that you don't want to be high.
Yeah, it's difficult when I have to tell a merchant like, hey, you lost this chargeback. And they're like, what do you mean I lost the chargeback? We did everything right. And I'm like, there's nothing like we can do about it.
It's not a fair system, unfortunately. And the other thing I remind merchants too is that, talk about the time between the time that you hit the refund button and the issuer gets it. You mentioned TSYS, like all these back-end processors, what consumers and merchants don't realize most of the time, it's many computers, mainframes, it's batch files. It's, you don't mess with things that work, right? In the IT engineering world. And when you're dealing with billions of transactions a day, like some of these places, it's not easy to upgrade. So they have a lot of systems that seem pretty old, but hey, they make all this work that we rely on every single day. But you got to remember, there's multiple parties in place. There's a bunch of batch files. There's a bunch of things that don't happen in real time. But more and more, right, we train the consumer to think, hey, the minute I press this button, things happen. And thus, we end up in this situation too.
I always tell people, we talk about faster payments, and people think like, oh, all this stuff is happening like instantaneously, like, oh, I hit the button on Zelle and the person got the money in their bank account. But a lot of people don't realize like that's why I tell people it's so important to have two-factor authentication set up on all your banking and everything.
Oh yeah.
It kind of even upsets me when like from the credit card standpoint, why credit card systems on the whatever we want to call the legacy credit card processors, don't have some kind of system where like, oh, you're doing a charge. Now it sends you a text message to the phone you have registered with your credit card and gives you a whatever 4 to 6 digit code, and you got to go punch it in to kind of like okay the transaction. And I've seen this recently on some websites that I'm purchasing from, and it says, oh, we're sending you a text message to authenticate your transaction. And then you got to fill this in. And I mean, I just think that from a standpoint, like that's got to just be like across the board, you know, it's got to be
Well,
like
part of
across
that's
the
3D
board doing
secure.
that. Huh?
You know, part of that's 3D secure in some cases. Sometimes it's private, but but the problem with that is, right, we had, if you were a merchant 20 years ago, you know how bad 3DS was. Like I used it, it saved my business for about 3 months until it tanked it. And so now people are scared. Now it's used in Europe a ton, but it's not used here so much. And I think it will over time, because it is a way better, 3D secure is way better now. And plus, yeah, you can do it privately as well. Like that's something we don't have completely done yet, but we're working on some solutions around that where we could text, email, those kind of things, to confirm the transaction. Now, it doesn't make you have to do it as a consumer. And as a business, as a merchant, you don't have to listen, but it's another data point, right? Did you get that interaction? And I think we'll find that it does lower fraud quite a bit, but it probably depends on the industry too.
Yeah. Another thing is, I mean, in the United States now, we have like, I think we're at an all-time high on identity theft.
Yeah.
And there's just a ton of identity theft out there. I had a couple of merchants recently that came to me and they were like, oh, my credit card processing got shut off. And I go, for what? And I said, when's the last time you checked your credit? And they went and one guy checked his credit and there was like 30 or 40 inquiries for everything from mortgages, car loans, credit cards. Basically,
Well,
somebody got his info.
his info's out there.
Yeah.
Really, though, all of our info's out there.
Right. Everybody yeah. So, that's why you should have like Credit Karma or one of these things on your website so that on your phone, so that if somebody opens up a credit card, boom, or somebody does an inquiry, you get notified email or text message or however you have it set up so that you're control of that, so you don't have this kind of fraud. But merchants, they have no way to know that,
Yep.
about
So true.
how that's going. So if you were going to give advice to a new business owner about how to deal with fraud, what would be a couple of pieces of advice you would give someone starting a brand new website out? Like what should they be doing?
It maybe sounds a little self-serving, but you need to work with somebody day one. So, and that could be, say, Alan's company here, just a good payment processor. Don't just go to your bank. Work with a processor that understands, that knows this stuff. They'll give you good advice. Hopefully they say use Fraud Deflect, but even if they don't, you need somebody that's a pro with this stuff. The things change too fast. The regulations come down from Visa, MasterCard, laws change, FTC. There's so many things going on in this world. You can't hope to keep up with it. You got to choose. Do you want to be an expert at your business, whatever your business does, or do you want to be an expert at payments and fraud? Right? I was running a business. In the end, I went the fraud direction because I felt like that every time these things happen, the merchant ends up stuck with a problem. Right? We have to pay for it as merchants. And like Alan was saying, like VAMP, it's so unfair how it works right now that this is the first time ever that it's hit the acquirer, and it really impacts that acquirer. And then based on their rates, it can then impact the merchant. And so because of that, we have to think about it in a different way. It changes the game a lot. And if you don't have both a payment processor and ideally some kind of anti-fraud chargeback provider that's an expert at that, you're already starting out in a bad place. Because we were talking earlier before the show that when you start a business, this is not what you think about. And that's what I'm telling you, don't think about it for a second. Get a good PSP, get a good fraud provider. Now you grow your business. It'll save you so much money and time later. It might seem like a waste because who's going to defraud me?
Right.
But kind of like we just talked about with ID theft, right? Your information's out there. It's credit cards cost about 30 cents on the black market with $1,000 on them, proven, right? So it's not hard to get your card numbers. It's not hard to get frauded. And oftentimes, unfortunately, it's the little guys that get hit hard because you don't know. You don't have anything in place to protect you. And so if you don't, it's easy to defraud you. And then that's where they test those cards. Once the card works on your system, then they sell it for more money and they go to Best Buy or a big block store and buy a big TV. Or they use it in other places to commit fraud. And so, don't put a ton of time into it. Just make sure you've got good people on your side. Then build your business and grow, and you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, that's the main reason why I started my company was, I was a merchant. I owned a restaurant. I owned a catering company and a consulting company over time. And then I got into the payments business, and then I worked for somebody and opened my own company because I like helping business owners. And, so I always explain to them, I go, it's not one size fits all. You want to work, if you're selling whatever, Nutra, or you're selling telemedicine, or you're selling whatever, toys, right? You need to go to a credit card processor that understands your business, because you want them to work with clients who do that. Because a lot of times merchants will come to me, they're like advertising name brands on their website. And I'm like, well, we have to show the bank that you have agreements or how you're getting this stuff. And they're like, what do they care? And we're like, because that's the rules, and a lot of people don't understand, like, you gotta, there's certain rules that you have to follow, and then that's gonna, so you want to work with, somebody who's going to explain those to you. So, so you're not calling me going, yeah, I got shut off and now I need to fix this. And then we're like, well, you have all these compliance issues to fix, and then some of that could have caused chargebacks, where you're getting a bunch of chargebacks because your checkout page doesn't have check boxes on it. You don't have clear information about shipping and returns on your website. And it amazes me how sometimes these sites are processing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then all of a sudden, boom, some scammer finds it. They go write about it on the dark web, and then you're getting hit by a bunch of scammers.
Yeah. One thing I'll throw out there too, Alan, I think I was having a chat with some merchants a while ago, and two super fast things to add to that is that, one, even if you follow my advice and you don't specialize in fraud and payments and you get people that do to help you, go to a conference once a year, every 2-3 years. I'm actually on the board of one called Payments Ed. That's a great one, but there's a lot of them out there. And just to understand a little bit more. And that's where I met a lot of the people that help me do business today and keep me in the know and understanding these things. And secondly, speaking of that, like at one of these conferences, one of the best payment processors that I've worked with, and they've been bought and sold a long time ago, but their CEO and I were talking one day, and he just blew my mind. I had no idea, but this changed how I looked at things. I didn't know that the acquirer and the ISO, like your business, Alan, you guys are on the hook if the merchant goes out of business. So, entrepreneurs out there, if you go out of business, you're processing credit cards. Alan or somebody connected to Alan, they have to pay for all those refunds. Every single refund, every chargeback, all those fees will get paid for. And it's not going to be by Visa, MasterCard. It's not by the issuer. It's by Alan or somebody, an ISO, an acquire, a sponsor bank. So somebody's paying for this. And like, I didn't realize that. I figured, oh, the merchant goes bankrupt, the money goes away. Nobody gets it. But no, it gets paid. It gets paid by the people that provided you that account. And so what I would say on that is that it's really tempting to go to a system, a website, get a merchant account in 10 seconds that doesn't ask you any questions, that doesn't do much due diligence. Maybe there's automation, but you want the guy that drives you nuts, asking you for all these stupid links and these documents and ask you 1,000 questions to understand your business. Because he's actually helping you. He'll be able to defend you later. He'll make sure that you're being compliant. Because if you're not, you will be shut down, almost definitely. Or you'll have a lot of chargebacks, you'll have a lot of problems. And so once again, getting that good, really knowledgeable PSP, ISO, acquire, it's a good thing. It might seem like a pain, but it's the right way to go. It'll save you in the long run for sure. And remember,
definitely.
He's liable. That's why he's asking all those questions.
It's definitely a different process, and I think people should, because I always tell people, like, when they go to Stripe or one of these other similar companies to them, they're not reading the terms of service. They don't look at the restricted and prohibited list. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm shut off. My money's held. Boom, boom, boom. Why? And then they come to me, and then I have to go unravel the whole thing and go, okay, well, you did this wrong, this wrong, this wrong. They're like, well, why didn't they tell me that up front? Well,
you didn't ask.
That's not their business model, and you didn't ask. So if people want to get in touch with you, Scott, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Sure. So you can go to frauddeflect.com or scott@frauddeflect.com for email. You can Google Scotty Adams. I'm all over the web, YouTube, etc. So I'd love to hear from you, or reach out to Alan. He can help too.
All right. So we'll post in the link show notes. We'll have some links in there, possible discount. And we thank you for coming on the show today, Scott. It was enjoyable discussion. I hope everybody learned something. And if you have questions about merchant accounts, question about chargebacks, or getting set up with Fraud Deflect, we can help you with that, myself or Scott. So thanks for listening to B2B Vault, the Biz to Biz podcast, sponsored by NPS One. That's our new gateway, helping you do payments smarter and faster. Thank you very much, everybody. Peace out and carpe diem.